could you have written a more Hollywood script in Vegas for this game? You could not have done so. So that pretty spectacular. And I caught that tail end of what you were saying, Mark. You're 1,000% correct. That, it wasn't just that USC won, but the Trojans were teetering. They were, like LSU was just kind of leaning. And USC, it looked really grim midway through the fourth quarter. And, obviously USC left so many points on the scoreboard in the red zone first three quarters, easily could have had 24, 27. If USC's up 10, 13 points, which it could have been, some will say should have been, then LSU can't pound the ball with Emory. LSU can't, lean on its offensive line. The Trojans would have had the game exactly where they wanted, but because they didn't score enough, they left the door open. And so 17-13, USC's offense goes 3 and out. Woody Marks almost fumbles the ball with that idiotic lateral that he never should have lateraled. I mean, if LSU recovers that fumble, it's ball game. So it came really, really close to just completely falling apart for USC. And you're thinking, well, LSU is just going to kind of ride this wave to the end. Like it's all LSU. USC's strength and depth, kind of being tested, exposed. One could even say, it's all just the house of cards is all going to fall down. That defense just regroups and finds a backbone. And of course, outwardly, the first thing is we can tackle again. We can hit again. Imagine that. No more Alex Grinch. Guys actually knew how to tackle, knew how to finish hits, finish stops without, guys bouncing off them for 3 or 4 yards after the first point of contact. So obviously the physical toughness was there. But really, Mark, and you hinted at this, the mental toughness to not let this game spiral at that point. Regroup, short memory, erase the nightmarish 10 minutes that had just occurred with USC failing to get the hammerlock grip on the game, then LSU taking the lead, then LSU smothering USC's offense a few more times. Mentally weak teams, that's when they fold. And so as much as USC has physical toughness, man, what a display of mental toughness. The fight on mantra, it can be a cliche. This was the epitome of fighting on. When everything seemed lost, when everything seemed grim, that's when they redoubled their efforts. That's when they got stronger. That's when they found something extra. Oh my God. Like if you wanted evidence of a change in culture, right? We toss that word around so much in college football. Culture this, culture that. Culture's measured there. Middle of the fourth quarter, tidal wave sweeping against you, everything crashing and burning around you. It's like from a Rudyard Kipling poem, when all is tumult and all is about you and you're lost. I don't have the exact words, but that's from If, right? That's from his famous poem If. If you can treat triumph and disaster just the same, like with the same spirit, the same resolute character. That's what USC brought to the table, So everything was crashing down in that fourth quarter, and this team got tougher. Instead of shrinking, instead of wilting, it got tougher. It got better. And then Miller Moss. What more is there to say about Miller Moss? One game does not a career make. We said that all off season about the Holiday Bowl. Okay, you win a bowl game, after the end of a 7-5 season, interim coaching staffs and everything. It was great. It was fun. It was a feel-good moment. This was the proving ground. What do you got against LSU season opener? All the stakes, all the emotions, all the pressure. Miller time was the right time. I mean, there's just nothing more to be said. And he looked in control the whole game. Not to say that he was perfect. He had some passes batted down repeatedly. That's going to be an issue for him. Making sure that he's picking a throwing lane and he's getting the ball over the defensive line. Like that's an obvious thing for him to look at in film study, but really didn't make bad decisions. Like he ate a sack in the red zone instead of throwing the ball up for grabs. Like we didn't see him make those kinds of irresponsible throws that Caleb Williams made at times last season. always in control, and then able to deliver in crunch time. I mean, like, if you were going to say, Miller Moss, here's a test. Miller Moss, here's another test. Like, just test after test after test kept being rolled out. Various different high stress, complicated situations came at him, boom, boom, boom. And he had the answer every time when it really mattered. So, gosh darn it. I mean, like if you were just wanting to find a script or a scenario where USC answered so many questions, key questions, central questions. The peripheral ones are important in their own right because like all the little details come together to form a winning football team. But like USC answered the biggest questions. Not to say that there aren't still some huge concerns, but really so many of the biggest questions, with one exception, and that was the offensive line not being able to really mash the ball, getting shoved back at times by LSU's defensive front. That's really when LSU began to exert its influence in the game. Like, I walk away from this game thinking nothing different from what I've been saying in the offseason here at the Voice of College Football. If the offensive line puts it together, if the offensive line reaches its potential, this team's going to be really good. And so to get through a game in which the offensive line, wasn't terrible by any means, like provided lots of good pass protection in situations when Miller Moss needed it. All right, that was really good. But, the run blocking and at times getting pushed back into Miller Moss, like Elijah Page, Miller Moss's hand got dinged up because he threw it against Elijah Page, who was getting thrown back into him. And you also had Alani Noah, committing some false start penalties. There was some sloppiness there. I mean, every other unit really, stepped up. Like quarterback, we got it. Receivers, we got it. And of course, Danton Lynn's defense just could not have been any better realistically than it was. If that offensive line can take the next step in its evolution, this is a very, very well-rounded football team. And because Miller Moss is so composed and in control of situations, if that offensive line is not getting shoved backward into Miller Moss, and Moss gets a cleaner pocket and takes fewer hits than what he absorbed tonight, because he took a lot of hits after his throws. If USC's offensive line can just raise its game a few notches over the course of the season and be reasonably good against some of the tougher opponents on the slate, this is a playoff team. And we obviously talked about beating LSU gives you a chance at the playoff. Beat LSU, so we have that chance. In order to now go from having a chance to getting there, crossing the finish line, it really is all about that offensive line evolving and making concrete progress over the course of the season.
So you're right, Matt. When you joined us, I was at the culmination of all my points, and that was my closing point. And most important point was that when the tide was shifting, when LSU had gotten a couple consecutive stops, when they scored to take the lead at 17-13, when there was the Woody Marks fiasco that almost turned into complete disaster, when there was the near interception on the fourth down play, when the ball was batted up in the air and LSU almost picked it off, which would have set them up at midfield with a one-score lead, USC fought through that adversity. When they could have thought, okay, here we go again. We've never won a game like this before. For most of these players, they didn't cave in, proved to be mentally tough. My two biggest points out of a zillion that I've got listed here, but the two other big points also play into a few things that you've said. First and foremost, with Miller Moss, I separate this game from the bowl game for a few different reasons. Number one, although this LSU defense was just as bad as USC's was last year, they are obviously improved themselves. This is not a bad defense on the LSU side. What I saw out of Miller Moss in the bowl game was a guy that was taking advantage of his wide receivers abusing the other secondary. he did not make the difficult throws because he wasn't required to make them in the bowl game that he made tonight. I saw a quarterback who stepped on the field and was good to start and generally just got better, and was making extremely difficult throws under duress, under tight coverage. And so he was lights out.